Hello, guys. In this session, we are going to explore a crucial recent judgment by the Supreme Court concerning the minority status of Aligarh Muslim University. So, this topic not only highlights the complexity of India's legal stance on minority institution, but also touches an important constitutional provisions and historical rulings. So let's get into the background. In this session we will be discussing the background and the key judgments and the implications of this case, especially in the context of Article 30 of the Indian Constitution. And you can expect a question also in the upcoming exam related to this. So, guys, let's get started. I'll share the PPT and we'll discuss. Okay. So let's look at the background of the case, guys. Okay. See, the status of Aligarh Muslim University as a minority institution has been a contentious issue for decades now. And understanding this issue requires a look back at the historical amendments and the significant court rulings under Article 30. And that actually empowers religious and linguistic minorities to establish and administer the educational institution. So let's look into that. The origin and establishment, if you see, AMU actually established in 1875 by the British authorities, and the institution was later renamed as Aligarh Muslim University and given a minority status. So that enabled it to cater specifically to the educational needs of the Muslim community. Now, if you look at the post-independent changes, what happened is after independence, a significant amendment in 1951 brought about changes in how religious instructions were provided in Aligarh Muslim University, which is making it optional. So this change was rooted in Article 28 of the Constitution, which states that institutions funded by the government cannot enforce religious instruction. And that underscored the secular nature of the state-funded institutions. So let's move on to the next slide. Look at the 1965 and 67 judgment and its impact. See, the major turning point in Aligarh Muslim University's history came with this 1967 Supreme Court ruling, which actually stripped AMU of its minority status. So if you look at the rationale of the Supreme Court in 1967 judgment, the ruling by five-judge bench stated that Aligarh Muslim University was neither established by a Muslim community nor administered exclusively by Muslim. So, therefore, it could not qualify as a minority institution. Now, what are the repercussions of this judgment? Actually, this ruling triggered a widespread discontent, particularly within the Muslim community, as the decision was seen as an encroachment of their rights to maintain, minority-run educational institution. So, let's move on to 1981 amendment now. So basically, following these controversy and the reactions of community, Parliament enacted an amendment in 1981 to restore the minority status to Aligarh Muslim University. So this step reinstated AMU status as a minority institution and allowed it to cater specifically to the educational interest of the Muslim community. Now, if you look at the key provision of this amendment, the 1981 amendment actually sought to reinstate the autonomy of Aligarh Muslim University, including its ability to provide religious instruction and also to cater to a primarily, Muslim student community. So the controversy on reservation was also there, and in 2005, Aligarh Muslim University introduced a 50% reservation for Muslim students in its postgraduate medical programs. That's a move which was challenged by critics who basically argued that a government-funded institution could not have such kind of, religion-based reservations. So let's look into the Allahabad High Court verdict after this, okay? So basically, the Allahabad High Court, in response to the 2005 reservation policy that we have just discussed before, actually struck down the reservation and also challenged the validity of the 1981 amendment. So it argued that government funding nullified AMU's claim to minority status. If you look at as a secular principles should prevail in publicly funded institutions. So the main idea is that if it's a publicly funded institution, it should be based on secular principles. Okay, so the when you are getting the government funding, that means actually your claim of minority status has got actually nullified. So the argument against the minority status, if you look at, the court held that the government funding implies secular governance. So when you're getting funding from the government, it is inherently means secular governance, and where religion based preferences or such kind of reservation in admission could conflict with India's secular values. And if you remember, we have discussed many times that when you talk about amendment, even the amendment also, it should be based on Keshwan the Bharati case. That means the basic structure cannot be altered. So if you look at this amendment also, it is against secularism, which is a basic feature of the constitution. So now let's look at 2023 Supreme Court ruling that was revisiting the minority status. So the latest ruling by the Supreme Court is actually a groundbreaking for several reasons. Now, if you look at this, it's a larger bench, seven-judge bench actually. So a seven-judge bench was constituted to re-examine the 1967 ruling. So that's a five-judge bench. Now the bench is actually split 4-3 decision, and it has overturned the 1967 verdict actually. But it's a minor thin majority, right? 4-3 is the majority. Now, if you look at majority opinion, actually, Chief Justice is also part of it. Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud and three other judges argued that government funding should not disqualify an institution from having a minority status. Okay, so just because you're getting government funding doesn't mean that you need to disqualify an institution from having a minority status. And the judgment stated that AMU's origin in 1875 served the educational interest of the Muslim community. So when it was established in 1875, it actually for the purpose of serving the interest of Muslim community, and thus the minority character should be preserved. So that's the key point here. So just because government funding is there, that doesn't deprive of any institution from having a minority status. And if you look at the establishment of this at that point of time, it was again for benefiting for the educational interest of Muslim community at that point of time also. Now, if you look at the dissenting opinion, who supported the 1967 ruling. The dissenting judges, if you see, argued that the government funding implies secular obligations, and making minority status for AMU, is incompatible with the funding sources. So that's the dissenting judgment, the dissenting argument, who are in favor of 1967. So here, that's not the case. Majority, though it is a thin majority. So that's how it was done. And if you look at the key points in the ruling, see, the Supreme Court's majority opinion introduced, nuanced interpretations that could impact how minority institutions operate India. That's why I told you in the beginning itself, this is going to be a very important topic. If you look at the historical context, see, the judgment recognized Aligarh Muslim University's origin as a community-driven initiative. That means when it was established in 1875, then itself it was primarily for protecting the educational interest of the Muslim community. So that was actually aimed at the welfare of Muslims. So it emphasized the university's establishment as a response to the educational needs of Muslim community. So initially, if you remember, I told you that 1967, at that time, the argument was it was neither established by Muslim nor administered by Muslim. So, but that's not the case. Here, it is acknowledged that it is for the Muslims' interest it was established. Now, flexibility in minority institution, if you see, the ruling stated that minority institution could still offer secular education while retaining its minority character. So, provided it continues to primarily serve the community's welfare. Okay, so again, if you look at the government regulation which is permitted, you can see the government may regulate aspects of the institution. Such regulation should not alter its character as a minority institution, but government can regulate, which is permitted. And this means that while Aligarh Muslim University may face some regulatory scrutiny, its fundamental identity should remain intact as it is. So now if you look at the current stand of the government and the future step, so the current central government led by BJP have expressed opposition to Aligarh Muslim University's minority status. And, the government primary argument is rooted in the fact that substantial public funding has been provided to Aligarh Muslim University, over 5,000 crores between 2019 and 2023. And Solicitor General actually argued that, Aligarh Muslim University's substantial government funding conflict with its minority status, as minority institutions should ideally be financially independent to maintain autonomy in their governance and policies. But here you are getting substantial government funding. So what could be the next steps? See, the Supreme Court has left the final decision on Aligarh Muslim University's minority status to, smaller three-judge bench, which will provide the ultimate ruling on whether AMU, Aligarh Muslim University, can legally maintain its minority status. So this decision will further clarify the stance on government-funded minority institutions in India. Now, if you look at the broader constitutional implications, see, this case has actually highlighted the fundamental issues surrounding Article 30, the minority rights, and the relationship between the government funding and secularism. So, Article 30 actually provides religious and linguistic minorities with the right to establish and administer the educational institutions, and this provision is central to the case here at this juncture. As it actually questioned how much autonomy can be allowed if government funding is involved. Now, if you look at secularism and funding, see, the case actually underscores a very critical question. Can the institution that receive public funding operate with religious or community-based preferences, or does secularism mandate a complete neutrality? So these are the questions which are coming into the picture. Now, the significance of this ruling, guys, the Supreme Court ruling on Aligarh Muslim University's minority status is a landmark case that addressed the delicate balance between minority rights, secularism, and government funding. So the ruling opens doors for broader interpretations of Article 30 and may set a precedent for other minority institutions in India. So this case emphasizes the importance of historical context and legislative intent also in understanding the status and functioning of minority institutions in a secular state. So yeah. Now we have to wait for final decision from the three-judge bench, which will ultimately determine whether Aligarh Muslim University retains its minority status in the light of its funding legally. So, guys, thank you for your attention, and I hope this analysis provide clarity on the complex yet crucial and critical subject in the Indian constitutional law. So let's continue to observe how this develop and understand its implications for India's legal and educational landscape. So thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.